Hello and welcome to a conversation with Andrew. We're going to talk about a couple of things today, BitClout being one of them, and the very exciting Koinos preview, the Koinos test preview. How are you, Andrew?
Developer Preview
Del
Testnet.
We're going to be talking about something to do with
Yeah.
Koinos.
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a big milestone getting the developer preview out. It's might not sound like it, and it is quite a simple little thing, but it's many months of extremely difficult work. So we're
Yeah,
pretty excited.
I didn't think it was a little thing at all. Like I thought it was actually a big deal because it really is like the first thing that you guys have put out that like we, the developers and the community can actually use. Like, the types seemed exciting, but for someone who's not technical, it's like, I don't really know what that is. It sounds good. But
Yeah, it's so
the
technical.
but the test preview is something that we can play with. And I saw like on Twitter, like you showed a screen print of, like I think that was the blocks being produced or whatever, and it looks super cool. Like things were happening on your computer. One thing I did want to ask you about it though was the developer test preview. Is that essentially me running the blockchain on my computer, or is it connecting to your test blockchain?
Yeah, so right now this would just be your running locally.
Yeah.
What we're really demonstrating is all of the microservices communicating with one another, right? That was a huge part of the work that we've been doing. No other blockchain has been built with a microservice architecture. And in order to have a genuine microservice architecture, you need lots of little programs all communicating with each other, not necessarily with other nodes in the network. There is a P2P microservice, and that's that's the function that serves. And so once we launch the test net, that's when you'll be syncing up with a larger network. We have run a network internally. It works, but no, you're just it's just to enable you to run the blockchain locally. And for me, it was actually the first blockchain, I think, node that I've ever actually run. And I was a bit embarrassed to admit that to my teammates when they asked me. They were like, "Hey, did you ever run a Steam node?" And I was like, no. And they're like, "Oh, it was super technically challenging." And so I almost didn't appreciate just how simple it is. I know you had difficulty running the developer preview, but for me, the biggest part of it was downloading Docker. That took like 3 minutes, and the rest took like a minute or two. And it was so simple and straightforward. But with other blockchains, it's usually incredibly difficult to get the node up and running. And it's funny, I guess we were so worried that with the microservice architecture and all of these little programs, each of which needs to be run kind of almost independently, we wanted to make sure that moving to that architecture didn't result in like a negative experience for node operators. So they did a ton of work to make sure that it was super easy. And we're very happy with the outcome. Like if you look at BitClout, this is this huge project. They claim to be on a blockchain. They claim to be doing innovative things. Yes, we're very early. We still have a test net to release and a mainnet to release. But that just goes to show you how achievable it is to give people the software they need to authenticate your technology. All of our foundational technology is in that developer preview. You can run a node, you can see the basics of the blockchain, and the repositories are open source, so you can dive into that code and validate that yes, there's real technology here. There's there's a real blockchain here. And it struck me as a major red flag when they say they have a blockchain. Why can't I run it? That's kind of the whole point of building blockchains, is that everyone can participate in the network.
Maybe you just don't understand blockchains.
Clearly.
So I think one of the great things about the developer preview, at least for me, because I don't really know what I'm doing, this is really my first kind of adventure. Like the Koinos miner was the first miner that I'd ever run. So with the developer preview, it means if it's entirely on my computer, it means if I break something, I'm not ruining it for everyone else. So like that's kind of a big deal. It means I can play with things. And then if I just destroy it, I can just like restart it and go again. Instead of accidentally, I don't know, spending $20 million on gas fees because I pressed the wrong button or I did the wrong smart contract.
Yeah, that is a great point, though. We definitely take great care to ensure that no matter what an individual can do, that it really doesn't impact the network as a whole. But yeah, hurting yourself is always an option in crypto, and we want to mitigate that risk as well.
So I saw this morning that BitClout was kind of doing a little bit of a GFAM thing, in that they're releasing this new functionality called Diamonds that allows you as a creator to reward your followers. And so like that was interesting. I guess I'm excited for new functionality to get out there, especially in more social media sort of stuff. BitClout potentially helps me in GFAM in that getting that kind of rewarding your followers type situation out there. But looking into it, it does seem pretty dodgy. I was really curious about BitClout, especially since they seem to put people on their blockchain that had never asked to be on their blockchain. So initially there were lots of people going, hey, I've got this big Twitter account. Why am I on BitClout? Like, how did that happen? And, the value of my account is $14,000. Like, who is holding that? Like, there does seem to be some really odd things happening with BitClout. So yeah, I'm curious, since you have looked into it a little bit, like, how does it work? Is it just a spreadsheet?
Usually that's how these things work. Although this one does have a lot of large support, or seems to have a lot of large institutional support. I think that the thing that I find most disappointing about the BitClout saga is simultaneously how much they seem to be repeating the mistakes of previous platforms, borrowing features from existing platforms. I see absolutely zero innovation in what they're doing, which is fine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, no acknowledgement of the other projects in the space, the other people who've come before them. They've certainly never spoken to us about our experience at Steemit, and they certainly didn't learn from the experience at Steemit, where we saw that Steemit's pre-mine of tokens plagued that organization and that platform really until today. And they went ahead and did the exact same thing.
I guess with the sorry to interrupt, like the diamond features that they're talking about is essentially just upvotes on Steem, which is what Steem has been doing for 5 or 6 years. Like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, you're upvoting the people. Like, I do it all the time on Hive. If someone comments, I give them an upvote. It's not a creator coin, but it's still an upvote. They're getting value out of interacting with me. So yeah, BitClout has said like, oh, no one has ever done this before, but it's very, very similar to things that other blockchains have been doing for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think that the best argument you can make in their favor is something like, well, it's marketing, it's puffery. What we've seen in the past is that it doesn't necessarily matter who has the best tech. It's who has the most money, who has the best marketing, and who has the strongest backing? Do you have the backing of great big venture capitalists? And so maybe their argument is, well, the sense that I've gotten since the moment I heard about them, that was that, oh, this is like a move fast and break things type thing, where we're going to validate the concept, we're going to put up a website, we're going to hack something together, validate the concept, and then build. Which is, been common practice in Silicon Valley. It doesn't really work with blockchains because they're a bit harder to build.
Yeah.
But I can see that argument. That being said, that doesn't exactly endear them to me. The whole beauty of decentralization, which is, blockchain is a decentralization technology, is that it gives power to the people. It is supposed to get rid of intermediaries. It is supposed to not make a bunch of really like a small number of really rich people, even rich people, at the cost of all these little people. And what you see them doing is a lot of stuff that's like, oh, you're going to get rich, we're going to make you rich. Yeah. But really, there's all these people who've been in the beginning, and it's them who's really getting rich. And I don't see them doing anything original or innovative that is going to result in a lot of people getting rich. And I'll try not to go into too many technical details, but as we know from our experience in this space, scaling social applications on a blockchain is extremely hard, especially if you're putting all of the posts and comments onto the blockchain. So is that what they're doing? If not, where are they putting it? And in fact, one of the innovative features that is actually baked into the developer preview of Koinos that we haven't even talked about yet because it's just like so kind of low on the list of things, is something that came out of our experience at Steemit called passive data. And so the way we think about general purpose blockchains that can be designed to host any kind of application like BitClout, is that what we think of as smart contracts, what we think of as blockchains, that's active state. What we're usually thinking about is active state. And the most expensive thing you can do on a blockchain is add to that active state. And what we found in our experience at Steemit working on the Steem blockchain is that there was a lot of stuff that we were putting into active state that didn't need to be there at all. It had nothing to do with decentralized consensus. And kind of during that time, actually Bitcoin came out with a technological innovation called SegWit. Yeah. And SegWit is effectively a technology for keeping data out of the block so that it can be pruned by node operators, which reduces the cost of running the network. And so what we've done is basically include that innovation in Koinos, but because Koinos is general purpose, unlike Bitcoin, it opens up all these different possibilities. For example, that's where you can put posts and comments, which, to give people watching this an understanding of how expensive it is to use a blockchain for things. I'm not talking about storing videos and photos on a blockchain. That you simply cannot do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking about that stupid tweet that you wrote. I'm talking about a comment to a post.
Hey, that tweet took me seconds to come up with.
Yeah,
seconds.
Yeah, exactly. It might be genius, but that is stored on the blockchain forever, and that is incredibly expensive, and that has nothing to do with your token balances. So what passive data on Koinos enables developers to do and users to do is to submit that information to the network, distribute it using the network, but tag it to be removed from the state when a node operator does a reindex, whatever. You don't need to understand that. But what this means is that the cost to the network is dropped dramatically, which means that the cost to you is dropped dramatically. And if you're talking about a platform like BitClout has fees for everything you do.
Yeah.
So if they don't have that feature, which we don't know because I haven't been able to look at what they're doing, they don't talk about what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think that they're operating under the classic assumption that, oh, it's just blockchain, we'll figure it out. We're smart, we're good engineers, we'll figure it out. Well, if you didn't design this into the architecture at the beginning, that's going to be a really challenging a problem for you. But I guess their idea is, well, we'll just copy all the good ideas from other projects. But yeah, you know, I mean, especially if you're not decentralized, then you could change the blockchain however you want.
Right. I mean, if they're just running a spreadsheet, then it doesn't, you know, they can build the blockchain later with all these features once they figure out what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just to drill down on that point, so a blockchain essentially has like thousands of node operators essentially replicating each block, right? And so to put a tweet in a block means that 2,000 people need to store that tweet each on 2,000 servers. And that's why it's expensive. Is that kind of
yes? Okay. They need to store it there, and they need to store it there for all of time. And then they need to add new tweets, posts, comments, and on Steam, the votes were there too, and even votes would probably qualify as this. Now with Koinos, right? The beauty of being a general purpose blockchain is that these are problems for the developer.
Yeah.
But we're going, hey, here's this great tool we know from our experience. You're going to want to put a lot of stuff in this passive data. You could probably put votes in the passive data as well. If you want to put it on the blockchain, you can do that too. You know, I think we were very happy to get out of, no offense, the social media game on a blockchain. Not that it's not a good idea. You know, we very much want to see GFAM succeed and want to give you the tools, but it's so hard.
So GFAM doesn't store any social media stuff on a blockchain. All we're using blockchain for is for the tips and payments and micro payments. Like that's it. Nothing else is stored. So yeah, I mean, that does mean that we're centralized, but it means that we're not replicated 2,000 times either. That's
really what it's good for, and that's the way to do it. And I have to say, and this is maybe a pitfall that BitClout has actually avoided, to give them like a little bit of credit, just to be, you know, agreeable. I think what really happens, and I know you personally, so I certainly know this is not the case with you, but people go, oh, look at this blockchain technology. This enables you to make money. Let's make money. How can we make the most money we can? Social media. Social media is a great way to make money. You know, we're going to replace Facebook. We're going to replace Twitter. We have this new technology. It's called blockchain, and we're going to be super duper rich. Okay, let's put everything on the blockchain. Now everything's immutable and it's super expensive. How do we justify this monstrosity? Oh, censorship resistance. That's what we're trying to do here. You're going to get censored, and you need all of your posts and comments preserved for all eternity forever, because some big bad person's going to go and take that away from you. But it's not authentic. It's not a genuine interest in protecting people's speech. It's this sequence of decisions that traces back to, we want to make as much money as possible. Now, maybe BitClout is going to avoid that, is avoiding that. I see a bunch of other red flags that I think they're making that imply to me that it's really about the money. And maybe they're just smart enough to realize that that's a played out value proposition. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that there are situations where you would want text posted to a blockchain, and you'll be able to do that on Koinos. If somebody wants to build an app that has the option of adding text to the blockchain state forever, they'll have that option, but it's gonna be a lot more expensive to do that. We obfuscate that cost with our feeless model, so you don't feel like you're paying the cost. You're paying it in time. You're not losing any tokens, but you have a lot of tokens locked up to store that text. But that's great. That's exactly what we want people to do. We want people to in particular, developers. We want developers to be thinking about network resource consumption and giving their users the tools they need to have a great user experience without charging them an arm and a leg, without having an unpleasant user experience. And our role here is to give developers as many tools as possible to build those apps and create those great user experiences.
Yeah. So how does that work in terms of, if I lock up an amount of coin, that gives me computing power? Is that kind of how that works?
So this is super important. Great question. We don't want people having to think about using Koinos apps, period. Every decision that we make is with the objective of enabling a user to sign into an app and begin using the app and never get asked to purchase a token.
Yeah.
The way that you described it was effectively how it worked on Steam.
Yeah.
You had to think about how much of your tokens you wanted to lock up, and you had to lock them up for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And this actually highlights another interesting point, and it kind of ties back into BitClout, where the real reason you had to do that was because of the vote-based token distribution mechanism. You had things that really shouldn't be influencing how tokens get distributed, influencing how tokens get distributed. And whenever you're dealing with how money gets distributed on a decentralized network, things get very complicated, very difficult to upgrade very fast. And so, this is kind of a small feature, but it had such a dramatic impact on the user experience, where you had to think about how much tokens you wanted to lock up for 2 weeks. First, it was 2 years.
Yeah.
And then you got to lock it up, and then you got to decide. And so obviously you have to lock up more than you think you might need, just to be safe. And then when you no longer need it, you got to power down. It's going to take 2 weeks, blah, blah, blah. Again, a lot of that had to do with actually the voting and preventing attacks on the voting system.
Yeah.
So by eliminating the voting system from Koinos, not eliminating it, but by saying, look, this is just a general purpose blockchain. If you're a developer who wants to do voting and distribute tokens with voting, you just write that smart contract. We're going to make it super easy. We're going to make it great. But it has nothing to do with the platform's token. So we no longer really need to worry about all of those issues. And so the way we designed Koinos is to have the tokens automatically lock and unlock based on your own usage. So you'll perform a transaction, a little bit of your, so I know I'm going to tell you some things that you already know, but the way we think about it and the way we design the system is as if every individual coin token that you hold contains a property called mana that gets consumed down as you perform transactions. So you buy 100 coin, you're at full mana.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want for free. So you say, okay, I want to submit this post or comment or vote, or I want to transfer this token, or I want to perform a Uniswap trade, right? Like, come on, this is going to be like the big use case early on, is I want to perform a Uniswap trade. You submit the transaction. You can't set the price. You don't have to think about the price. The blockchain just says, the blockchain does the hard work, and it says, okay, you're about to consume this many CPU cycles. You're going to take up this much storage in the database. and everybody else is trying to kind of do the same thing. So how much of your mana, and they're basically bidding in the amount of mana that they have of available.
Yeah.
And the blockchain, and it's bidding in a very like abstract sense, because it's all happening behind the scenes, and human users, they actually can't influence it. So you can't bid it up. It's a purely what we call a rational determination, meaning it's a ratio between the mana that people, you know, are using to submit their transactions and the network resources that are available.
Yeah.
And so Koinos just says, okay, that costs you this much mana, but it doesn't take the mana. The mana isn't a token. The mana just gets consumed. It just goes away. And then that token that contained that mana becomes locked for probably a fixed period of time. We actually haven't made this determination yet, and this will be part of the discussion that we have with the community. We always hate to decide on arbitrary numbers, but the regen period for mana looks like one of those rare circumstances where you actually kind of just want to pick an arbitrary number, like 5 days, where any mana consumed gets regenerated in 5 days. So if I have 100 tokens and I do something and 1 token's worth of mana gets consumed, that token becomes locked for 5 days. Now, practically speaking, what'll really be happening is that you'll perform a transaction. It'll consume a fraction of a token's worth of mana. That token becomes locked. You can no longer use it, but you can keep spending down the mana in it. And only once you use up all the mana in that token and you move on to the mana in the next token, does that token become locked. And so at a high level, what it'll look like is more like a battery. Like your token balance will be a battery that's getting drained down, that's being built back up and being drained down. And what this enables us to do is give users a great user experience that enables them to just perform transactions, look at how much of their mana is getting used up and how much of their tokens are getting locked, and then adjust their behavior, slow down the rate at which they're performing transactions so that they can recharge and they can perform the transactions that are really adding a ton of value to their lives. And so this is also an important part of scaling this stuff and making sure that it's sustainable, because it motivates people to use the blockchain the right way, use it for valuable transactions. Don't use it when it's excessively congested, because it's going to lock up more of your tokens, but you're not really thinking about, you don't need to think about what you're doing so much. And at no time are you losing your tokens. You're not spending the tokens. At the worst case scenario is that you have to wait 5 days to liquidate your entire stash.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how does that convert? And maybe this is too technical, but like, so if I have 100 coin and I've used 40% of my mana doing transactions or whatever, how does that actually convert into computing power? Like the person who's supplying the node, what do they get out of that situation?
It is certainly a super technical question, but I'm going to try to answer it in a kind of non-technical way. Because I actually think that this is super interesting. It's super critical for how you make this system work and how you make it sustainable over the long term. And again, I don't see projects like BitClout getting this right. Like honestly, this shit is so hard. Like
it's surprising anyone does it.
That's the single thing that really frustrates me the most in the space, and it really shouldn't, because it's a huge advantage to us. Is when people come in and they just don't have sufficient respect for the technical difficulty. They think it's a problem that you can throw money at, and it really isn't. These are
when you guys are up and running, companies will be able to throw money at you to solve it for them.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But you know, when I interact with serious organizations with serious engineering talent, they know what they don't know.
Yeah.
That's why we are confident in our business model, is because we know that serious people will want help from a team with our kind of experience, including the experience of building Koinos from the ground up. But to answer your question, so how does the mana translate into actual network usage?
Yeah.
I think the most important thing to understand about how this all works is that we're dealing with a blockchain, right? Which is a chain of blocks. And the blocks, a chain of blocks that only grows. And each block has a certain amount of theoretical space within it. And so what we're talking about is developing a system that enables users to take up space in those blocks in an affordable and sustainable way that doesn't deliver a terrible user experience. In fact, we want it to deliver a fantastic user experience. And I think one of the major things, if not the most important realization in terms of delivering a pleasant user experience on a blockchain, is realizing that what you want is a consistent use of the blockchain. So, for example, Koinos won't have a set block size. If you say, "Hey, it's all a megabyte," and you know, like,
yeah, I mean, Bitcoin has 1 megabyte block sizes, right? Or maybe 2.
I think so.
Yeah.
Bitcoin has fixed block sizes, and look, different use cases have different benefits, and I'm not saying there's one way to do it, but you know what we're trying to achieve is a blockchain that people can use for free and that they can have a predictable user experience, right? So at a technical level, and this will be the kind of where I'll try to, this will be the most technical. I'll try to make this the floor or ceiling or whatever of technical discussion. Is what that means at a technical level is that you want it to feel the same every time you submit a similar type of transaction. When you vote, we're so stuck in the social media thing. You know, when you do a trade on Uniswap, you want it to feel about the same as whenever you make a trade on Uniswap. As far as the network is concerned, the cost is always roughly the same in terms of computational resources.
Yeah.
You know, so you're submitting this transaction, it's consuming these resources. It should feel about the same way. And in the case of Koinos, what that might mean is that you see your mana bar go down a little bit, you know, on a Koinos app. Now, what you don't want to happen is you're used to seeing the mana bar go down like this, and then you do one trade and it goes like this. and now everything's locked in. Now you can't do anything. And so the way that we address this is that the block size becomes a target. The algorithms that we're developing, specifically the algorithms around the mana system, are about targeting a block size. So, for example, what if nobody's using the platform? There's no transactions in blocks. So let's say that the target block size is 1 megabyte.
Yep.
And for 10 blocks, nobody submits a transaction. Yep. So we have 10 megabytes that didn't get used. why not allow the next block to be 10 megabytes in size? There's right. So Steam, from what I remember, other blockchains, they don't have a mechanism really for doing that. That's certainly the downside with going with the steady with the fixed block size, is that you don't have this ability to basically enable like surge usage. And of course, you don't really want to motivate surge usage in blockchains because they're so expensive. But if you have this mechanism for maintaining stable usage, and if your goal is to encourage productive use of the blockchain and consistent use of the blockchain, then the Mana system actually enables us to do that, is a mechanism for doing that. So if you have low usage, well, now using it, and developers can build interfaces that do this, that show this to the user. They can say, hey, nobody's really using the blockchain now. Go use it. It's going to consume a lot less mana. And so, of course, what we expect to happen over time is that people modify their behaviors. People will be more inclined to use the blockchain when they have great user interfaces that tell them that it's low cost. They'll be less likely to use it when it's high cost. And so what we'll then get is this more stable usage of the blockchain. And this is part of how we get to our objective, which really, the most important objective of Koinos, in a way, is to ensure that the amount of network resources that you can consume is directly proportional to the number of tokens that you have, to the amount of coin that you have. So, a question that we get a lot is, how much will I be able to do with my coin? How many transactions will I be able to do with my coin? And the thing is, we can't answer that. We will never be able to answer that, because it's a dynamic system. It's an unpredictable system. And the moment that it would become predictable, it would become gameable. And instead, what we want to be predictable is, if you have 1% of the token supply, you will be able to use 1% of the network resources. You'll be able to fill 1% of a block at all times. And the key to delivering on that objective is this consistent use over time, is if everybody is being incentivized to use the blockchain in a stable fashion, and then what we can do within the Mana algorithm is encourage a smoothing of that behavior, add in some buffering to modulate any kind of fluctuations. But again, the goal is always going to be, how do we maintain as consistent a user experience as possible, so that when you perform transactions, your mana is consumed at as predictable a rate as is humanly possible.
And so would that then change depending on how many node operators you had? Like if you had 100 node operators, then mana might take this amount. But if you had 1,000 node operators, then it would take less because there's more computing space available? Or is that not relevant?
I don't think the number of node operators will wind up dramatically influencing it. We're not using proof of work. That's a really good question.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and I don't know the answer to it. I think our answer is that it shouldn't. And in fact, I think over the long haul, what we obviously want is a situation where the more nodes that are involved, the better the user experience gets, and the more resources that are available to users. But I don't think it's funny. I think internally, the problems we see are very different than the problems that ordinary people see. And I think sometimes we don't realize how fantastic a user experience people are going to get.
Yeah.
Like, you know, people, like people are really worried about how much they'll be able to do with a given amount of coin. And what we saw, and to go back to Steam as an example, we saw the user experience that people had on Steam, which people don't talk about the user experience, which I think is the ultimate sign of good user experience,
Yeah.
right? And Steam was storing all of those posts and comments in state, which was hugely expensive.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you're not going to be talking about that on Koinos. You're going to be talking about that token transfer, that Uniswap trade, which is extremely cheap. And there isn't going to be all those posts and comments bloating up the chain. And if people do want to put posts and comments on Koinos, they'll have that passive data field, which will, you know, not add it to state. And so, you know, if you think about what you can do with spending 100 ETH versus the number of transactions you'll be able to perform for free on Koinos, I think people are going to be stunned. And I think that for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, maybe even longer, because of our vertical scaling solution. So like one of the things we haven't touched on is just, you know, it's like, you know, all this is about user experience, but the flip side of user experience is basically making sure the cost of running an individual node is super low. And that's where our vertical scaling solutions come into place. And, you know, passive data is just one of those scaling solutions and not even the most innovative of those. And what we mean by that is things that, you know, reduce the cost of running a node. And I think that's the ultimate answer to your question, is that from what I understand, you know, I think in some ways, Mana will act like gas, in the sense that, you know, an individual node operator is determining the gas fee. Now they're specifying it. In our case, it will be the software. It will be the node itself, which is, you know, it's an objective measurement where the network resources that were consumed to perform the transaction are what is exchanged for the mana. But it's the network resources on that individual node.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense, because obviously, like, if I'm just running a node on my PC, I'm only providing this much computing power. But if someone has like an AWS server farm, they're producing a lot more. So you would expect they would be helping out the network a lot more than me, and potentially should be rewarded a lot more for providing that computing space or that computing power.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think what's happening is that the node is running the blockchain, it's processing transactions, it's looking for code that it can execute inside its virtual machine. And then based on the output of that code, it's modifying its database, its ledger, and that ledger has to sync up with other ledgers. Yep. But it's not like everybody is necessarily performing that computation, and that the cost of that computation is like baked into everything. Anyway, yeah, the point is, you know, I think we've covered like two really important points in my mind, is that there's, you know, one is that the goal, in my opinion, should be having the cost of performing the transaction be as closely determined by the objective use of network resources as possible.
Yeah.
Right? That's what should be determining the cost. And actually, by eliminating fees entirely, I think that this is a super critical step, that it doesn't seem like other projects see, because it's so counterintuitive. But only by eliminating the fee can you get to a place where no, now it's purely objective. It's, you know, your transaction, there are the network resources that were consumed, some of your tokens are locked. And what that means is that the only way that the node operator has to make money is from their rewards. They're paid by the blockchain. And so the final piece of this puzzle is that now they only have one lever to pull, and it's lowering their cost of operations, running more efficient hardware, which is exactly what we want them to do. We want a super efficient network. And ironically, you don't really have that incentive on fee-based platforms where the node operator can just say, well, I'll just increase my profits more.
Yeah.
Right? As long as we're all doing it, it'll work.
Yeah. Which is collusion and not decentralization.
Well, they've spent the money on the hardware.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're going to do that math and just say, well, I can't sell this, you know, I'm going to lose this much if I sell the hardware. So it pays to just put that off, increase my prices. It's not like everybody else can constantly be buying new hardware all the time. That's going to have its own cost. Yeah. So, you know, it's rational, it's not collusion in the sense that they don't have to talk to one another. Yeah. Their incentives are aligned in that direction. And that's the thing that nobody in the space wants to talk about. We all like to talk about incentives, except when the incentives in the platform are poorly designed. And it's no.
So just before we finish up, you tweeted out a website called fees.wtf. Fees.wtf was a website that you tweeted out. I used it and was slightly horrified. So what this like little website does is it basically calculates all the fees that you've spent on the Ethereum network. And yeah, it adds up. It's amazing. Like, you know, like you're horrified and like, oh, this transaction cost me $60. But when they're all added up, it's pretty upsetting. And I saw some of the screenshots that other people had posted, like people have spent a lot on Ethereum fees.
Yeah, it's wild. And I don't know, it seems like we're the only ones. It seems like people think that fees are just a fact of life. And
I mean, yes, they have been till now, really.
Right. Yeah. And I think maybe the most helpful way to understand the problem is that, yes, everything has a cost, but there are different ways to pay that cost. And so with Koinos, we enable you to pay that cost in time.
Yeah.
And then, you know, where it you know, I probably got to work on a better way of saying this.
We're just going to take your firstborn. That's all there is to it.
Well, you know, it's all about creating a growing economy that is producing valuable goods and services.
Yeah.
You know, people look at these individual features of a product and they think this is the way that it has to be. Money needs to have a fixed cap. Money needs to have an inflation rate. Consensus algorithms have to be proof of work, or they have to be proof of stake. They're losing sight of the bigger picture, which is we're trying to create a robust economy filled with valuable goods and services. And the monetary system of that platform should be designed to incentivize value creation. And so every monetary system creates money out of thin air, obviously.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd only have zero. Right. So what they do is they go, well, we create a bunch and then there's a cap eventually, or there's this decline. It's like, no, like, you create these tokens. If you give them to the right people, they produce value. How do you determine who are the right people? These are, you know, these are valid questions, but it's all about directing those tokens in the right way. So on Koinos, we don't give you tokens to perform transactions. If you want to use the network for free, you have to purchase tokens. So you're putting capital into the system. With Steam, this was kind of a problem. And on other platforms, they didn't really do this the right way. You buy tokens and now you just get network resources. Now, you know, now you should spam, because what else are you going to do with these tokens? But on Koinos, well, you can produce blocks with those tokens and earn block rewards. But if you do that, you can't do that. You can't use those same tokens to perform transactions. We're going to have a staking component. So you can put your tokens in there, and so that's where the token inflation will get divided, is between people who are running the nodes and people who are basically long-term stakeholders who are, you know, want a yield. And so by keeping your tokens liquid so that you can perform transactions, you're incurring an opportunity cost.
Yeah.
You can't use those tokens in those other things, and you can't use those tokens to perform transactions at a time when you might get more for them, more transactions for them, right? Like a lower congestion time. So you are making a sacrifice here. You are contributing capital. You are giving up opportunities to earn yield. And what the network is getting out of this is all of this usage, because a network is only as valuable as how many people are using it. And so what we're talking about is this cohesive system, a holistic system that's designed around enabling people to have pleasant user experiences on the platform, which is a requirement.
Yeah.
But also doing it in a sustainable and scalable way.
Will you be calling this a monetary system?
Monetary. Oh, I'm gonna have to use that. Yeah, that's good. We have a monetary system. Oh, I'm already having arguments with people about whether mana is money or not, and I'm like, it is not money. It is not a token. Stop. I don't think we realized how powerful a concept mono would be in this type of system. You know, people want it to be all kinds of things. It barely exists at all.
Guys, can I get a mana potion? Surely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. There's a lot in here to unpack. Yeah, I mean, every time I speak to you, I get more excited about the possibility of Koinos and how I can use it, and how we'll see, like, to basically be a part of a new economy is really exciting for me. Like, there's a lot to that. So thank you. I hope you have an excellent week. And I'm going to totally figure out this developer test preview.
Yeah, we're going to get in there. We're going to help you.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye.